Hello and welcome to the channel today. I'm Will and I'm going to be talking about 10 books that I think everyone will love. Of course, that's impossible. Reading is subjective and that's a beautiful thing because it means that we're not just given a list of 100 books that we're all going to adore and then that's the end of the reading journey. No, it's subjective. We all love different genres, different reading tastes, different themes and different priorities in our reading as well. But this is a list I've kind of curated of what I think people who kind of lean towards speculative fiction, what the majority will really enjoy. And these are ones that personally I have loved. And so usually they're books that are kind of a bit easier to read, a bit easier to get into. They're not ones with that kind of what I imagine Malazan might be like. I've not read it, but a lot of people do not connect with that series because it is quite dense. It can be very difficult. I've gone with ones that are quite easy to immerse yourself with. And many of them are page turners, so they're quite easy to kind of power through the book as well. And so let's just kick it off with the list. 10 that I'm going to start with. William Shakespeare, his collection, and The Silmarillion are the first two that I'm talking about. Okay, no, not these two. That is a joke. I'm not going to be saying that everyone will enjoy all of Shakespeare's works or that everyone will enjoy the history of Middle-earth, which is shown in The Silmarillion by Tolkien. Personally, I love The Silmarillion and I love a lot of Shakespeare plays, but I definitely would not say that they are a collection in text that everyone would enjoy. And so they're the kind of books that I wouldn't put on this list, even though I personally love them. So hopefully there's a few recommendations here that you think, you know what, maybe I'll pick this up. And let me know if you've read some of these and was I right or was I wrong? But let's get into the real list now, jokes aside, and get into the serious business of reading. So first one I've got up is Later by Stephen King. This is one of his lesser talked about works. I believe it came out maybe 2019, so 5 years ago now. It is quite short. It's one of his shorter books. That's one of the reasons I'd recommend this. It's quite difficult when you're in a book that you're not 100% loving. When you see there's 600 pages to go, it can be a bit soul crushing. And so a lot of these books I've lent towards the kind of smaller page count as well. And Later is the first example of that. Stephen King, of course, he's known as the king of horror, but this isn't really horror. It's got that kind of premise of Sixth Sense where we follow a boy who he can see ghosts, but only shortly after that person has died. So they remain for, I don't know, it might be 6 hours or it might be a day, and he can talk to them during that time, but then they go, but he can talk to ghosts for that first day. And so that is the premise, of course, of Stephen King. He usually takes the modern day world that we live in and know about, and so there's a lot of kind of pop references and a lot of pop culture brought into the mix, but he adds a supernatural element which is usually kept very small scale. And that's one of the reasons I love Stephen King's works. It's not about kind of this world earth shattering story where people are saving the planet. It's an intimate story about their own fears and revelations and the consequences of their own lives. And Later is very small scale despite having that kind of supernatural crazy element about it and having the extraordinary within the ordinary. In my opinion, this is one of Stephen King's best works that I've read. I think I've read 10 or 11 now. This is one of his best. It's quite short. It's like a detective story in one. You've got a murder as well, and you've got this crime aspect running alongside, obviously, the main story of this boy sees ghosts. And it's mainly about his relationship with his mother. And I love the character relationships in this, the conflicts we come into, but also those loving ones that we have. You don't get enough nice relationships in literature, and you get a great one here. Later has stuck in my memory, one of my favourite Stephen King works, and one that I think the vast majority of people would really, really pick up. And I hope to hear it talked about more when people discuss Stephen King's best works, because, as I said, I've read a few now, and this is up in the higher echelons in my opinion. And then next up, completely changing genre, we've got sci fantasy. We've got Red Rising by Pierce Brown. And so I might be cheating a bit with this because this is possibly the most famous sci fantasy series other than Dune. So yeah, I'm cheating a bit because there's obviously a lot of people that like it. But I also think not many people would dislike it. Dune, I know, can be quite divisive, but Red Rising feels a lot easier to get into. And the kind of themes and the tone and atmosphere feels much more familiar. You've got the familiar ground in Red Rising of kind of that Hunger Games-esque premise, but in my opinion, done 10 times better. Pierce Brown is a great writer. This is almost the definition of a page turner. every chapter has a cliffhanger, has you wanting to read more, discover more, have questions answered, even as more are posed and there's more that you want to discover about this world. I'd say that book 2 and 3 are better than Red Rising, but this I'd still give 4.5 or 5 stars. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thought it's an incredible introduction to a great series that gets better and better. This is, as I said, has that Hunger Games-esque feeling, but it feels much more adult. And even though Darrow is a character who some people get annoyed with because he gets everything right, I like how he still often isn't the one in control, and he often uses the people around him to know that he can do the best he can. And in the background, you've got his motivations of vengeance looming in the background that creates so much conflict, and it's just wonderful the way it is done. But yeah, Red Rising is the second book that I'm talking about today by Pierce Brown, the sci-fantasy series. Please do check it out if you have not already. And then I've got something that you may have heard of, The Shadow of the Gods by Papa Gwyn. And so, yes, I may be biased. He is Papa Gwyn, and I don't just call him that as a joke. He is my father. I'm very lucky to call him my Papa Gwyn. But in my opinion, The Shadow of the Gods is a book that almost everyone can enjoy. I'd say I understand with Malice or The Faith from the Fallen that a large group of people might not click with it because it is a huge cast of characters. It's a long book, and a lot of people, they find it difficult to keep up with kind of the continental sprawling world that is crafted. Personally, I absolutely adore it, and I know a lot of people obviously do as well, but I think that The Shadow of the Gods is smaller scale, even though it is very epic. In book 1, you only have 3 POVs, a much smaller cast of characters, but it still keeps that epic backdrop. And also, a lot of people nowadays know a fair bit about Norse mythology. They know the basics. And Shadow of the Gods, whilst it's not set in the real world, it's inspired by Norse mythology. It is taking the premise of, imagine the aftermath of Ragnarok. So the battle of the gods, most or all have died, and it's their remains that are left on the battlefield. And so this is kind of a few generations after Ragnarok, and what have the survivors done with kind of the barren landscape that's left behind? And you've kind of got the blood of the gods in mortals, you've got remains, artifacts, mercenary groups, running away from slavery. Found family is at the heart of Shadow of the Gods, and that's something that's at the heart of any Papa Gwyn book. And it's one that I think that readers of any genre really identify with, and it's something that really increases that kind of being able to immerse yourself to that greatest level and engage with a story because of the relatability of found family. Everyone has either wanted to find people who they really identify with, or they've had the pleasure to, and they know how important that is. And so I think that's where Papa Gwyn's works really click with a lot of people, and that is, I think, nowhere is it clearer than The Shadow of the Gods. So that's the first 3. And now on to some historical fiction without even meaning to. All these first books are in slightly different genres or subgenres. And so on to another, I have Boudica by Amanda Scott. This is historical fiction, but again, it's got that found family at the heart. Of course, the titular character, Boudica, the very well-known warrior of British history who fought against the Romans and has kind of become a symbol of liberty and fighting for what is right against oppression and the great power. So she's very kind of known as a very big figure nowadays, and this is obviously set in a time period where we don't actually know too much of the intricacies of what happened with Boudica. So Amanda Scott has done her research. This is an incredibly immersive culture that we are thrown into. We follow Ban and Boudica, and Ban and Brayaka, I should say, and oh my gosh, these siblings are just incredible to follow. I absolutely love accompanying them. Again, this is epic, but with a very intimate, small cast at the heart of it. I love that kind of contrast because you are engaged and you are enthralled because you love this small cast of characters, but you've got that epic backdrop and that feeling of doom looming over the series as well. And so Boudica is a series that I would definitely put on that list. It's very easy to read, brilliant prose by Amanda Scott that really just hooks you and immerses you in the culture. You've got characters at the heart of it, as this is for sure a character-driven story. It feels very unique and different, but very familiar and comforting at the same time. Amanda Scott is a writer that really makes you feel part of the world, and it's like it's a living, breathing character that you're interacting with. And for that reason, it's very easy to also read Boudica, Dream and the Eagle, book 1, very quickly as well. So that is the fourth, I believe. And now getting into nearly halfway through the list. I've got Jade City by Fonda Lee, returning to the fantasy genre, but Jade City is much more modern. I was a little bit put off when I knew it was modern urban fantasy because I don't know, because it is also fantastical. It's a made-up land, and often when I hear that premise, I only really enjoy kind of modern urban if it's like kind of Ben Aronovich, small scale, Rivers of London series. So it took me a while to make the dive into Jade City, and I've only read book one. I've not read the rest of the series, but I think this is really a fantasy book. That could be a beginner fantasy book as well as a book for veterans of the genre as well. A lot of people compare it to The Godfather, but that's just because it's kind of a mafia family. That's really the only similarity. I'd say it's much more like Peter McLean's series, Priest of Bones, and Peaky Blinders and that kind of vibe instead of The Godfather. I've really enjoyed the magic system, which I'm sure we'll find more about in the following books. And I really like that it's quite a wide, sprawling book where it's in a small area, but you follow most of the perspectives of this family. And so you've got kind of the breadcrumbs of the divisions of their past really becoming clearer throughout the book. I love that not always revealed right at the beginning. It takes a while to find out the history of a lot of these characters, because when do you ever find out anything about someone in real life? It takes you a while to find out about what makes these characters tick. Why don't they like each other? And often you can't say completely why you don't like someone or why someone doesn't like someone. It's often a lot more personal than that, and I really like how that is understood in Jade City. And so, yeah, this is another one on this list that is character-driven, but it's got kind of a big backdrop as well. Of course, as many readers of speculative fiction enjoy, and that's why I've chosen Jade City for this list. And then next up, I've got, okay, it may seem strange at first to say everyone will enjoy this, but I've got The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It feels kind of wrong to say people enjoy this because it's a very dark book. When I tell people that, oh, it's about a relationship between a father and a son in kind of post-apocalyptic America as they're wandering across the country, they think, oh, that sounds so nice, very heartfelt, heartwarming relationship between a father and son. That sounds wonderful. Well, when I say that, they probably speak about 20 words to each other. They frown at me a bit. So The Road isn't as heartfelt as it originally sounds, but I'd still think that this is a book for many, many people. It is so easy to read. I'd say it's the easiest to read out of the Cormac McCarthy books I've read so far. It does have that heart at the core, which really drives you throughout the story. But it's also a page turner as well. It's quite thrilling. At times there's sequences in here that make my heart thump, and I just can't put the book down. And that really helps turn this into more of a page turner than I'd say Cormac McCarthy's other books are. And I don't know, there's just something absolutely incredible. This book has that X factor. It's one of my favourite books of all time. Millions and millions of people have enjoyed this despite how dark it can be, and that is testament alone to how brilliant and flexible The Road is in terms to the demographics it appeals to. And so that is why The Road is on this list. And I'd say if you haven't read any Cormac McCarthy, dive into this, but make sure that you've got a happy book to follow it, because you don't want to be reading this on top of many other depressing books as well. And now something very, very different, going into some mythology. I've got Kirke, I believe it's pronounced, or it might be Circe, but I believe our patron said it's pronounced Kirke or Kirke. And so if you've been following the channel, you know that I am a butcher of pronunciation. So I'm very sorry. Please forgive me for anything I pronounce wrong, and just give me benefit of the doubt. But this by Madeline Miller, again, I'm kind of cheating. It's a series that millions upon millions of people have already loved, and many people say is a book to really get people into reading, as well as those who have read a lot already for them to enjoy as well. This is mythology, Greek mythology, and one of the first amongst the recent wave of Greek retellings. But what I'd say is particularly appealing about this, not only is it Madeline Miller's wonderful prose that really carries you along the story in a lyrical manner, but this is a much lesser known piece of Greek mythology, whereas tales like Ariadne and things like that might not feel as fresh because you know a lot of the story anyway. Of course, it puts its own twist on it, but it might not be as fresh as this, which you probably will not know a lot about, and Madeline Miller has filled in the gaps as well. But I really thoroughly enjoyed this. I do want to reread it at some point, because I think I read it shortly after it came out, which might have been 7 years ago, which, wow, time does fly. It was 6 years ago. Time does fly. And so this is another one that I'd say it's a Greek retelling. A lot of people love Greek history. It's quite light. It's very easy to get through. It's got a lot of depth as well. And it's small scale, so you're not really diving into having to learn about a lot of the world and lore. It doesn't boggle you down with all of the Greek history and the wide sprawling Greek mythology, the hundreds of figures in that. You don't have to know all of them to dive into this. You can go in with base knowledge, or even less, because it will guide you along the journey as well. But there we go, that is another, and I've lost count of how many I've done now, but I think I might have 3 or maybe 4 to go. And I'm sorry, I've been cheating with the Titans of Genres, but I think this is the last time I'm cheating. Okay, so I've got The Hobbit by Tolkien. It just felt wrong not to have Tolkien on this list. The Hobbit, when I ask people what book got you into reading, they often say Harry Potter or The Hobbit, because I think they just are the 2 most common. And that is for good reason. Lord of the Rings, I absolutely adore, but I know that the descriptions of landscapes, the wide passages of descriptions, and Tolkien's love of lore and history might detract a bit from the story for some people, for quite a lot of people in reality. But The Hobbit has a lot of that kind of stripped back. It doesn't have as many songs. It is much more focused. Of course, it isn't as adult. It isn't aimed more towards a children's demographic as well. It doesn't feel like children's literature, but it's one that is flexible and appealing, I'd say, to every single demographic. And that is so much rarer than you would first think. When I thought of kind of what other books fit in this category, it was very hard for me to think of many. There's many that if I read now that I enjoyed as kind of an early teenager, I really would not enjoy them now. But The Hobbit you can love as a child or as an adult or as a teenager or at any point in your life. And that is just truly rare and extraordinary. And of course, I love the land of Middle-earth. I love the quest that we've got. I love hobbits. You just can't beat a good hobbit. And with that as the title of the book, everything else inside is just gold as well. And so, yeah, of course, got The Hobbit. And the last time I'm cheating with a hugely popular titan of a genre. And then I believe I've got 2 to go. And so one is The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper. This is historical fiction set in 1st century Pompeii. So we're in the Roman Empire. If you like that kind of history, this is a series for you. But if you don't need to know any of the history to dive into The Wolf Den. Elodie Harper immerses you in this culture. We've got Amara as our leading character. She's been sold as a slave. And so that's quite a hard-hitting premise. And this is a book filled with heartbreak, but it's also very heartfelt. There's not many books that manage to be very dark in tone at times, but also bring me joy in others. The happiness you feel at the sisterhood in The Wolf Den is remarkable. The way that Elodie Harper makes you feel that emotions and those bonds of friendship is just truly rare. And I think other than maybe Mayflies, which I've read as well, very few books can achieve that sense of feeling the strength of friendship and the importance of friendship as well. This is an incredible trilogy, and this is an incredible start to that trilogy. Each one is quite different in the, how can I say this without spoilers, in the position that our characters are in. It changes quite a bit. I can't say anything more, but if you want to find out, please do read it. It's one that I think, with the incredible prose that is accessible to everyone, with it being character driven, with the history not dominating but still immersing you, I think Elodie Harper creates a book that most people can really enjoy. And it has been amazing over in the Brothers Gwyn to hear so many people have picked up The Wolf Den and really enjoyed it. People who usually wouldn't. And I've really enjoyed hearing that Spaced Out Wizard has enjoyed this series recently. And then Chris and Mads are picking it up and enjoying it as well. And so that is awesome. Me and Ed have been rambling on about this series for so long now, and it's wonderful to see more people picking it up. So that's The Wolf Den, and I believe I only have one more to go now, and that is the most recent book that I've read that is on this list, and that is Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. This recently won the Waterstones Debut of the Year award, and for good reason. We are thrown back into, I believe, 4th century Syracuse. So the premise is that the Athenian army, they've attacked Syracuse, but their fleet was beaten and destroyed. But there's quite a few hundred survivors, and they've been thrown into a quarry in Syracuse to basically slowly starve and to serve as a reminder to the people of Syracuse of their victory. And in this, we've got a very small story in it. We've got 2 potters who have recently lost their jobs, and every day they go to this quarry to talk to the Athenian prisoners and they start to give them food or drink if these prisoners can speak lines of plays to them. And then this escalates, and soon they decide to stage their own play. They're going to stage the play of Medea, and they're going to use as the cast the Athenian prisoners, which of course is going to upset a lot of people in Syracuse who hate and despise the Athenians. And so this is going to throw a lot of obstacles in the way. And I did not know how immersed I could become in a few potters putting on a play. The way that Ferdier Lennon builds these relationships between characters in just a few pages is unlike anything I've ever seen before. It's quite a short book again, so it's very easy to get through. It is heartbreaking and heartwarming. I know I've said that a few times with these books, but I don't say that lightly. It's only that in this list I've curated, these are all books that I love, so they got similar features in that way, but I don't say that lightly about a book. It takes a lot for me to say that a book really broke me and made me feel those emotions to a higher level, but also makes me happy as well. It's so hard for a book to achieve one of those, yet alone two. And so Ferdier Lennon deserves that debut award for achieving that. It is truly an exceptional book. If you want to hear my deeper thoughts on it, as I've been rambling a bit today, please do check out my review with my brother Ed as well, who also loved Glorious Exploits, over on The Brothers Gwyn. But there we go. They are 10 books that I think most people will enjoy, especially if you naturally lean towards speculative fiction or historical fiction. There's quite a wide range of genres there, and I know I've included some curveballs like The Road, which initially sounds very depressing, but I think most people can still really enjoy it. So please let me know if any of these you're intrigued in picking up. Will you pick any of them up? Have you already? Have you got any recommendations for me? And are there any that I just left out which I really should have included? Please do let me know. But everyone, thank you so much for watching for now, and stay safe.